have Noah Boache. Did I pronounce that correct? We have Noah Boache with us here today, and he is going to be talking mental health related stuff. He has, in fact, I'm going to let him introduce himself because I might butcher. I might not sufficiently like explain and cover everything that you've done, because when we met with him a couple of months ago and he was explaining, and I felt like a dwarf next to him and all of his achievements. And so, yeah, so I think Noah, please introduce yourself. And today he's going to be focusing on mental health. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what you'll be presenting on and talking on today. And if there's anything else you'd like to add, do feel free. So please carry on.
Thank you. And next time, last time when we were talking and I was trying to tell you about myself, I need somebody to write it down, and then I can use that as my bio, because people ask me questions and I start telling them, and then it sounds nicer than any bio I've ever written. So we'll see. My name is Noah Boache Adam. I am a PhD student at the University of Calgary. I am in population and public health stream at the Community Health Sciences. That is one thing on my plate. The other thing on my plate is I work for Alberta Health Services as a health promotion facilitator in addiction and mental health stream. So my focus in promoting mental health is addiction and mental health. That is the other thing on my plate. I also have 2 Cree kids. So that's the most important part on my plate. So basically, I focus on things that are most important in life, which is our mind and the well-being of our mind. That's what I love to talk about. That's what I love to explore. That's what I love to learn about. And that's what I love to try and teach about. So that's what we're going to, that's what I'm going to use as the basis to talk this evening. And I don't know how long do I have, 3 hours or is it 2 hours? Or
Two.
There's 2 hours, okay, all right. So I gotta make the introduction really short then. Welcome, Jemima. My name is Noah Boache Adam. So you just stick with Noah if you don't want to say Boache Adam. I don't know why you wouldn't want to. It's lovely. So where do I start? Let me start it off this way. And I'm going to start off on the slideshow and on the slide deck. And we'll take it from there. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. Do let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Fantastic.
And no, if I could just interrupt for 1 second. So, Rita will be slightly late, but she does that. She sends her sincerest apologies. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. So since Rita is not here to say anything about me, everything I say is true. We go. Rita is not here to contradict. So fortunately, I'm very fortunate to have Rita as one of my supervisors on my committee for my PhD. So that's the exciting part now. And I'm enjoying every moment of it. So I want to start off our conversation by giving a little bit of a setting and then a little bit of a context. I am indigenous to the Nafana lands in Ghana. And I say that first, mainly because up until 1844, we were part under the Asante Kingdom domain, but it wasn't necessarily drawn on a map. 1844, my country, Ghana, was drawn on a map and the British won a flip coin or something like that. So they got to keep majority of where my land was. The France got to keep other parts of where my land is. I grew up in a town that is called Sampa in Ghana, but it is so close it's on the border of literally Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana. Majority of the town and its inhabitants are in the land of Ghana, but I still have family members who live on the other side of the border in Cote d'Ivoire. So up until
You speak French? A little
Go
bit?
ahead.
Do you speak French?
No. But I speak two languages of the local community. So up until 1996, I believe, if you came to my hometown and you bought anything and you got change, you better spend it in my hometown, because the change that was given to you was CFA and cedi all in one. The market woman just used whatever the money they have, and every kid knew what change you need to get. If you bought a candy and you gave a cedi and they mixed the cedi coins and the CFA coins, you knew exactly what you're supposed to get. So math was a really strong suit of my time. So I say all of that to give the context as, for me, my roots are very deep back home in Ghana. Around 1989, there was a military rule in Ghana. My dad's family had been very political. My grandfather died. My dad continued my grandfather's business. And since my grandfather used his business proceeds to support the political company, the politics in Ghana, when he died and my dad took over, it was assumed that he was using the money to continue politics. So it became quite unsafe for him and for my family. So my dad moved, got out of the country, and ended up in Canada. About a year or so later, he was able to get my mom to join him. And it took 7 years before, well, almost 8 years. In the 8th year of us being separated, me and my 3 siblings joined our parents here in Canada. If you come to Canada in those circumstances, you think you've made that your parents have made a great decision. And I don't for any moment like belittle the struggle that my parents went through, that the hard decision they had to make to get me here. But as you know, time passes and you learn more about Canada and its history, you recognize that, whoa, you are in a very, very difficult place. You're in a very, very challenging place. And for me, it is sort of fundamental to how I operate, how I hold myself, how I actually live on this land. Because what I recognized was, even though Ghana was colonized for years, and our resources were taken freely for years, it got to a point of time where in 1957, the country got political independence. So the decision of who makes the terrible laws that govern us was us. And as bad as it is, it's still us that's doing it. And there is some pride in that. But I live in Canada where the people who are stewards of this land do not have that opportunity, that liberating freedom to make that decision of how they governed, why they governed, and to make even the terrible decisions of how they are governed. So as a person of African descent, I acknowledge that Turtle Island, which sustains us, which gives me a place to work, play, and live, is that of Indigenous people, 2 of which are my children. And that honor I can never ignore. So for me, it leads me into saying that when I talk to anybody, when I operate in any way, I do my best to keep everything I do as rooted in my Africanness as possible, as much as everybody's asking me to shirk it, as much as the world wants to paint it as a picture, an unacceptable picture. I am African, and the way that I know things is particularly African. When you ask me a question, you get a story for an answer. That's how I grew up. That's how the way I don't know how else to make people understand that, and especially when I get the privilege to talk to other people of African descent who are not particularly Ghanaian. I'm excited to find out. So my knowledge, the way I know things is through stories and specifically orally, through hearing people share with me what it is. And it's pretty deliberate, a form to root myself in, because conceptually what that does is it forces me to appreciate my culture, to appreciate the philosophy of my culture, to appreciate my thought and my thinking process, and to acknowledge them as truth. In other words, conceptually, the way that in allowing myself or pushing myself to operate from an African way of being, I am allowing myself to see myself as an end unto myself and not as a means to anybody's end. That's my greatest sort of weapon that I have. And all of that, you might have heard that in many different concepts, in many different ways. It is a way that is called a decolonization, or that's how I easily define my stance, the stance that I take to operate from, as a decolonization stance, right? That's the framework from which I operate and I do everything. It's important to set this up this way, specifically when I have this privilege to talk to you, because I need that sort of understanding before we even get into the introduction of mental health, right? So does that make any sense to anyone? To you asked me to introduce myself and you get stories and stories and stories. That's because I am African to the core. I try to shake it, but I can't. So does that make sense to everyone?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's do a little bit of an introduction, and let's put a definition on mental health, which we've heard again. If you saw the first slide, I say our mind, our well-being, because mental health simply is dealing with the well-being of our mind. Now, I'm not talking about the well-being of our brain. I'm talking about the well-being of our mind. So for me, mental health is the capacity for each and everyone on here to feel, to think, and to act in ways that enhance our ability to enjoy our life and to deal with the challenges that we face on a day-to-day basis. That's mental health. So the well-being of our mind is essential. It's very, very important for your health, as well as it is for the community that you belong to's health. So if you as an individual, if your mind is well, you holistically are then on the path to wellness. Okay, if that's mental health, then most people then start seeing, okay, I think I understand where he's coming from. It is the well-being of my mind. Okay, I have a mind, that's true. What else? What else can we go with? I want you to think about it this way. Everybody, as long as you have a mind, you have mental health, right? That's the full stop. We stop there. You have a mind, you have mental health. But that means that if everybody has mental health, what about people who are not well in their mind? What about those people? You know, that's the question that gets asked immediately afterwards, after I put this definition out. And it's simply this, that our mental health is not a static thing. It's not like you either have mental health or you don't have mental health. Rather, it is a state that we're in. So you can have a positive or a flourishing mind, or you can have a declining or a languishing mind. If you have a positive, flourishing mind, you are able to, your thoughts are in your control, your feelings are in your control, and the actions that you take are in your own control. Therefore, any challenge you face on a day-to-day basis, you are able to address it. You're flourishing. If you're not flourishing, if your mental health is declining or you're languishing, then your thoughts are not in your control. Like, if you can't change the way you're thinking, you can't change the way you're feeling, and you can't change some of the things that you actually do. So when the way you feel and the way you think and the way you behave actually are changed, so they are so out of your control that you cannot function on a day-to-day basis, or it interferes with the way you interact or conduct your relationships, then we say you have a mental health problem, right? So the way your ability to function, your ability to maintain and sustain your relationship is interfered, you have a mental health problem. Now, if you have a mental health problem and you get a trained clinician to be able to point out and say, this mental health problem that you have is this specific disorder, then you can have mental illness. Does that make sense so far? You can't have a mental illness without a trained clinician actually diagnosing you. You can have all the symptoms that is in the DSM-5, but without a trained clinician, you do not have the illness, or you do not have the disorder. You're just having the problem. Why is that important? This is important on two levels. One, there are certain supports that is, for our society, kept behind and controlled, so you don't get those supports without a trained clinician giving you that diagnosis. An example is having pharmaceutical support for your mental health needs. So, for example, let me use something that everybody might understand. If you had all the symptoms of diabetes, you don't have diabetes. Until a doctor says you have diabetes, you don't have diabetes. You can have all the symptoms you want, but you don't have diabetes. Why do I say that? You cannot go to your pharmacist and say, I want a medication to help me control my diabetes that I have, and the pharmacist give it to you. Does that make sense? So that support for diabetes is kept away from you without a medical or a trained clinician giving you that diagnosis and making that access available to you. And it's the same with, yes, thank you very much, Caroline. It's the same when it comes to mental health. So the trained clinician uses what is now accepted. The APA put out, the American Psychological Association put out the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. We're in the 5th edition of it, and it's a huge book. It's like this big. That talks about what you need for your problem to be qualified under the diagnosis of a disorder, right? So if you bought the DSM-5, which you can actually go online and buy one, and you read through the DSM-5 and you see that you fit every aspect of one of the disorders on the DSM-5, let's call it RAD, reactionary attachment disorder, right? You read through and you're like, oh my God, my whole life, this fits me to a T. Then let me go and get the help. you are still not going to be able to get the help because you yourself are not the trained clinician and therefore not allowed to diagnose yourself. Right? So I hope that helps bring an understanding between mental health, what we're talking about, and mental illness, what I don't want us to focus on. Because whether you have mental illness or not, it doesn't matter. You still have mental health. So if you have a mental illness, it's almost like saying that somebody with diabetes cannot be healthy, right? Health is not just the absence of disease or the presence thereof, right? You can be healthy and have an illness. So you can be flourishing even though you have a diagnosed disorder. It just means that you're getting the right supports when you need it. Make sense so far? Talk too much, told too many stories. Let's now try to put things in this picture. So I've talked about our mental health or our mind's well-being being our ability to have our thoughts in our control, our feelings in our control, and our actions in our control. Those three things, right? So I'm going to try and break all these three things down and see if we can learn a little something from there, and then we'll get into our discussion. So how am I doing for time? Okay, thank you.
5:27, Noah.
Thank you very much. Let's start with mood. So how many here, who here has felt a feeling they haven't felt before? Have you felt a feeling you haven't felt before?
I don't understand the question.
What do you mean?
I mean,
When I
have
had a
you
kid,
felt
that kind of feeling?
that you haven't felt before? Caroline is saying yes.
Just
You're saying
any
yes?
feeling, right?
Okay, all right. So basically, nobody here has been in love before. Or you don't think in that sense, and it will make sense in a little bit. I'm the oldest of 4 kids, so I have been the bigger older brother to my little sisters, and I like to tell myself this, that I was very protective, but also allowed space for growth. So I do remember my sisters coming into their teenage years, and you know, my parents are there, but I felt that like I need to talk to my sisters, because I've seen some of my friends and my mates looking at my sisters, and it's not like I like the way they see my sisters or talk about my sisters. So instead of fighting them, I'll talk to my sisters. I'll have a conversation with my sister. So I was talking to my sister, and I asked my youngest sister, she's old with her own kids now, and I asked her what does she think love is? And she gave me her own definition. I asked her, how would you know you're in love? And she said, well, when you're in love, you feel this feeling that you know you haven't felt before, and that is love. Right? So that's why I ask everybody, have you felt a feeling that you haven't felt before? Then if you have, then you have been in love, or you felt what my sister defines as love. But me being quick on my feet, I asked her, what if you're somebody and you haven't felt diarrhea, upset stomach before? The first time you feel it, is that love? It could be, right? It's just a matter of perspective and actually putting it in order. So when we talk about feelings and moods and emotions, the best way that I can explain it is using what you see on your screen, which is a rainbow spectrum. And green is my favorite color, so I'm very happy that green is right in the middle of the rainbow spectrum. And if you look at the rainbow spectrum in that you have green in the middle, I call that being stable.
I'm ready now, Rita.
Okay.
Rita, can I talk to you tomorrow?
For sure.
Okay, bye.
Perfect. All right.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. It was a great way to announce your interest. Welcome, Rita. So if you look at your emotions, being green or being stable means you have your feelings in your control. When you want to feel good, you can actually think and do things that will help you feel good, right? When you want to feel sad, you can actually choose to watch a sad movie and be sad. Or even sometimes when you don't want to feel sad, like you're watching a movie and the sad area comes in and you don't want that to linger, you can actually get that feeling changed. You can do something about it, right? So you're green, you're stable, that's perfect. We're gonna go to the right, the warmer colors, the warmer emotions, and then come down to the colder emotions. We're starting from green. So moving to yellow, what you have is hypomania. And hypomania here, the best way I can get you to imagine hypomania is remember if you've been tickled before. Can you remember that? If you've not been tickled before, I feel very sad. Put up your hand. I'll wait for the hand raising and I'll get a volunteer to come and tickle you right now so you know you have at least a frame of reference of what we're talking about. Being tickling is really, really nice to do it to other people, not always to get it done to you, but being tickled is nice. It's a nice feeling because it elates all your senses. It elevates your mood. And now, with those with their camera on, when I talked about thinking about the time that you've been tickled, almost your brain went there and a smile, as hard as people were trying not to, popped up on people's faces. It elates your senses. It elevates you. Now, have you been tickled before and somebody asked you to count to 10 and you were able to count to 10 before? You can sometimes you can't. It depends on, like, you know, that's the sense of being in hypomania. Your senses are so elevated, your thoughts are unable to focus and stay on one, bouncing all over the place. But it's like being tickled. You can actually tell the person to stop, and you can, you know, you can laugh while you try to have the conversation, while you try to do anything. A lot of people have learned to function even when they are in hypomania. Now we move one step over, and you're in mania. Being in mania is being tickled to the point of peeing yourself. Has anybody had that before? No? Oh my goodness, you guys are missing out in life. If you haven't, it should be part of your contractual marriage arrangement. You have to be tickled till you pee one time, at least once. Now, the difficult part is being tickled and begging the person to stop and them not stopping. Even though you're laughing, it becomes painful because all your senses are aroused, everything is elated, but there's nothing you can do about it. You cannot control anything. That's being in a state of mania. You have elevated attitude. Your thinking becomes so warped, you actually start having grandiose delusions in mania. If the person doesn't stop, even after you've peed yourself, it's very, very painful in that end. That's torture. And that is a level beyond mania, which very few people still get into that state. It's called psychotic mania. Your senses are so elevated, everything is so heightened that your perception, the way that you see the world, starts changing. You start hearing things that other people don't hear. You start seeing things that other people don't see. You start sensing things tactilely that other people don't sense. You start smelling things other people don't smell, or you start tasting things that nobody else is tasting. That is psychotic mania. So you can have a mental health problem that is so disturbed, but it starts off in a positive direction of our emotions, in an elated direction of our emotions. So that is mania. Now, let's come back to stable. Your moods are in your control. And we're going to go down to the cold ends of the spectrum. And the first cold end is dysthymia. This is a sense of, and most people call it functioning depression. Like you can have a functioning depression, or you're a functioning depressive person, right? That means you're able to do everything that you're supposed to, but you're not enjoying anything. It's almost like your senses are seared, right? You can't feel happy, you can't feel sad, it's almost like you can't feel because your senses are so depressed, your emotions are so depressed, but you're able to function. So you're in what it's called dysthymia. And the next section over for that, you can get lower, is being fully depressed. And this is where you start losing the currency to life. And everybody knows what the currency of life is? No? Remember this. If you take nothing at all from this session, remember that Noah said, hope is the currency of life. We exchange the hope that we have every day to keep on living. The more hopeful you are, the more extravagant you can get your life to be. But hope is the currency of life. And when you get into depression, it's that the first thing to be attacked is your hope. And then the emotions become so negative, so dark. Sometimes it feels like you're not just sad or low in your emotions, but rather hollow, like you're frozen in ice. You're unable to think that or believe you can think well. To take it one step further, you can't hope, you can't hope to get out of this because it's seeping out your hope, and you become helpless in that nature. Life almost takes a what's the point picture. This is a very deadly and dangerous place to be. The high association that people with mental health problems and suicide have together sits around depression. Because as you become depressed, as you lose hope, what's the point of living? What's the point of life? And you can easily see why people choose to end their life when they are depressed, especially if you don't have the hope of this ever passing, of this feeling that you're going through ever passing. It becomes really, really dangerous. As if that's the end of it. No, it gets worse. You can be so depressed, so hollow, that your senses, just like when you're on the manic end, your perception becomes tainted and warped. You start seeing things that people don't see. You start hearing things that people don't hear. You start tasting, and your perception is completely out of your control. That's where it can get to. And when we talk about mood. So does that help give us a picture of understanding emotions and moods right now for a second? So when we talk about mental health, and when I say it is like having your thoughts in your control, your feelings in your control, that's what I mean. That your feelings are in your control, that, hey, if you're feeling excited because you're being tickled, it can come down to a balanced way where you decide what to do with your emotions. If you're feeling low and sad, it's usually a situational. And once that situation is passed, you can come back to being stable or balanced. If you're unable to, if you have your emotions out of your control, if you have your feelings out of your control, we say you have a mental health problem that is in the order of a mood disorder, right? So this is mood disorders are categorized under this. Now, I want to push us to the mental health problems that significantly affects our thoughts, right? And that section I'm calling tension and worry. You know, we get tensions and we get worry. That should help us answer the next question that I have. What is stress? What do you think stress is?
We have Raisa who raised her hand.
Okay, go ahead.
When you have too many thoughts on your mind or in your mind, or when so much things going on in your life, and mix it all together, and it just gives you a headache and makes you want to explode.
Oh, thank you, Reza. You have had stress. You've been stressed out before. Thank you so much, Sherry. Anybody else? Go ahead, Afo.
Yeah, I think for me, like stress is kind of like what Raisa is saying. It's like an overwhelming feeling where like the stuff you have to do just it feels like too big of a task to take to tackle, be it a small task, big task, whatever, but it always just feels bigger, too big even.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you so much. You guys are real people. You've been stressed out before. You've experienced what stress is before. But I want to take us and give us a much simpler definition of stress, because what you have is the extreme end when you are stressed out. But naturally, stress is just any physical or mental, so any physical, any thinking, or any emotional strain or tension that we have. That's stress. Okay, so literally by asking that question out to the group, I literally put everybody in this call under stress. So how come nobody was stressed out? But I know stress more than this. What it is stress, we're under stress all the time. But when we don't consider it as stressful, because as this definition shows, let me see if I can get your attention onto it. As this definition shows, when you perceive that you have the resources to deal with the demand or the tension that's being placed on you, you're not stressed out. So I ask a question. If it's not compulsory that you answer it, you don't feel stressed out. If you kind of have an answer of what it is, you don't feel stressed out. The moment that you are not, you perceive that you don't have the resources to meet the demands, that's when all the feelings of stress comes in. That's when you become immediately stressed. Now, this comes with a second aspect of things. They go really, really hand in hand, and that's the worry part, which is anxiety. Anxiety is the worry we have based on the demand that's being placed on us. So to understand it this way, I ask you a question, your brain goes through the process of trying to find the answer, of trying to find a way out of it. That focusing of your brain on what the tension or the problem is, that's what we've come to call worry, because your mind is focusing only on that, ignoring everything else. When you have the resources to deal with that, it's not a worry, it's just a thinking process. Right? It's a state of worry, a state of apprehension, but the demand is there, you're able to meet it, you move on. When you don't have the resources to deal with that, your focus lingers longer on it. When you don't perceive that your focus lingers on it, then your thought on it becomes consistent. And then you can't really process anything else, but your mind is trying to bring all the other important things in. And then you get that overwhelming feeling and a headache, because again, I want to think about other things, but I can't focus on anything because I'm worried about this or I'm worried about that. But remember, the definition of stress is the tension that you have or the demand that you have. So if that demand is not there anymore, if the thing that's not stressing you is not there anymore, but the brain has gotten into the worry state or it's focusing on it constantly, then what we get is that significant anxiety. So stress and anxiety go a lot hand in hand. Normal anxiety is actually quite important for you. Anybody ask anything of you, you need normal anxiety to get your brain to focus on that. You're walking on the road and something slithers in front of you. You need your brain to focus on, why is there a slithering in front of me in Lacombe? Like, what's going on? You need your brain to worry about that, to focus on that. However, when you're unable to let go of that worry, even though the demand is no longer there, you're in what we call an anxious state. And being in a prolonged anxious state is very, very bad for you. Because then you can't do anything else that you're supposed to, because your mind is so focused on what it's not supposed to. And that's what Reza and Afo have said earlier. That's all the senses that you get. So because I want more time for our discussion, I want to put it this way. I want to move us into what behaviors and what expressions comes out when our mind's well-being is in a problematic state. I want to do that for a little bit, and then we'll look at how we support ourselves and each other, and then we'll go into our discussions. And then I'll open up and let everybody else talk. Leave me alone, I'll talk too much. So those who talked about stress, let me start from there and then go backwards to when your emotions are out of your control. When you're in a state of worry, or your attention is focused, this is for majority of the population. But for you, what I want you to focus on is change. When your thoughts are out of your control, in that you're worrying about something specific, you actually change the way that you normally behave. And your friends around you, when they are going through a stressful event or an anxiety-driven event, change the behaviors that they have. And it physically manifests itself, and you see that. You can see that your mind is racing. You can't focus on anything. Your vision becomes blurry. And everybody has a different way that stress and anxiety, when your thoughts are out of your control, manifests itself. That's why I'm asking you to focus on change. What are the changes that you're seeing in yourself? What are the changes that you're seeing in your next of kin, your partner, your friend? What are those changes, and what could it be linked to? Right? So this is the general, if you don't know the person and you want to see if there's some changes going on, this is what I want you to look out for. But if you know the individual, if you know that person, then look for changes that happens in the pattern and the way that they behave. Make sense so far? If you're looking at this on the phone, don't worry. What I'm going to do is I'm going to save this as a PDF, and I'm going to send it out, and then you can actually have it. And hopefully you can attach the picture to the many words that I'm saying today somehow. So if your emotions are out of your control, some of the behaviors that we see are the same, whether you've gone into a manic state or a depressive state. Literally, that emotion becomes overwhelming, so you don't want to infect other people with it. So you withdraw from others. You kind of don't get anything done because you can't focus on getting anything done. You have very, very much difficulty concentrating. Now, think about it. Can you concentrate on anything while you're being tickled? I asked even if you can count to 10 while you're being tickled, and nobody wanted to be a volunteer to see if that could happen. I don't see two people in the same room. I would have made that as the research topic and investigated it right now for all of us to watch it live. But it's very, very difficult to focus on anything, to concentrate when you're either elated or you're depressed in your emotions, right? And then a lot of people turn to what I will call self-medication. And self-medication is not a bad thing. And I said that low because I don't want to lose my job. Self-medication is not a bad thing. It is just not a helpful thing. Does that make sense? It is not helpful because we have given people the opportunity to actually study us and study behavior and figure out what will help. And we do that. So behaviorally, you do see changes, and it is expressed differently when our mind is not well. Now, why is this important? Why is it important that we've gone through all of this to get to here, where the way we feel when it's out of control, it affects the way we think, and that affects the way we behave? Because as I started, we live in Canada. The system that is Canada, the dominion of Canada, was not set up for you and I's progression or for our success in it. The reason why I say that is twofold. One, racism, but two, most importantly, the system that was used, the knowledge system, right at the beginning, the way of being that was used to set up the Dominion of Canada is not indigenous to you. It's not the way that your DNA is wired. It is not. So for that reason, you won't flourish in the system. For that reason, your mind is working double the time to be able to function effectively, to be able to function happily or excitedly or comfortably. So it's significant because we need to understand that what we should aim for even is not equality, is not to be the same as everybody else. The bare minimum we should aim for is equity. That's the bare minimum. That means that because the system is not designed for us, there should be resources in place that allows us to at least benefit from this system, or at least be able to navigate the system. Because this system is not designed for us, and if you look at the screen right now, like having everybody receive the same amount of resources doesn't help those whose core ways of being is not part of the designing of the system. Does that make sense? So the field game was designed not to be seen by short people. So treating everybody equally and giving everybody a box still doesn't help anybody, right? The bare minimum that can be helpful is to give everybody enough boxes that they can all see. That's the bare minimum of what we aim for. What we truly should aim for is justice. Let's take away the system. Let's take away the barriers of the system that prohibit success. Does that make sense? Why this is significant, why this is important, that your own mind's well-being is it's understood. because you're gonna have to navigate. We're gonna all have to navigate a system that's not designed for us, that's not designed for our success. And because we have to understand better how our mind operates and how do we, in that sense, use it to our advantage. Does that make sense so far? Okay, so finally, I want to wrap things up by looking at how do we support ourselves and our own mental well-being, and then how do we support others, right? Those are the two last things or the last thing that we're going to focus on, and then we're going to leave here. One, connect with someone who can listen to you without judgment. Someone who can listen to you without giving you the solution. Connect with someone who would develop your relationship. Connect with someone who, when they ask you a question and you tell a story, they're okay with that. Connections are very important for our own mind's well-being. Be active. Be physically active enough to the point of sweat every day. Because as we talk about, yes, Nketi, thank you so very much. When I say connect, I'm talking about relationships. And I'm guessing that ties into something you've done already. Oh, see, you guys didn't even tell me, and I tied it in. I should get $1 million. Relationships are so important, and just not any relationship, but an understanding relationship. A relationship where people listen to you just to understand what you're talking about, where you're coming from, and not to give you an answer, not to give you, the solution to what you're talking about, but just to understand you. You need that to build on that relationship. Thank you so much, Nketi. Being active is not necessarily getting a gym membership, which if you can, that's great. But being active is being physically active every day to the point where you're sweating, which uses up some of the cortisol or the stress hormones or the hormones that are released in our body when our mind goes through negative experiences. Take notice of your own mind's well-being. Take notice of your body. Take notice of the world around you. Take notice of the people that you care about. Would you be able to see changes in them? Be mindful and be present. That is the importance of our well-being. Learn something new. Learn something new. And this is almost like a no-brainer why it's important for young people to stay in school or to pick up a business idea or something, because learning something new actually enhances the way your mind works. You get to develop new skills of using your mind when you actually learn something new. And then finally, give back, volunteer. We're still looking to find out, because people are such social beings, giving back, volunteering, or donating, or giving of yourself, including just being someone who listens to someone, actually elevates your moods. Giving back is significantly important. So that's how we help ourselves. These are the 5 things I say is important to help ourselves. Now, I'm also going to give you 5 things to help somebody else, to help other people. And the first is to assess the individual. Assess with the intention of assisting the individual, right? If you're assessing people just so you can talk about them, that's called gossip. Don't do that. Assess them with the intention of assisting. And if you have that intention of assisting, then you approach the individual, and it could start with a really, really simple question. I'm concerned about you because I'm seeing this, this, and that. So I want to know, how are you doing? Give reassurance to the individual. Give the person autonomy and control and options. Please do not give advice. You know what advice does? Advice takes away control from the person. Options and information keeps the autonomy with that individual, because that's very important to their own mind's well-being. Feeling a sense of agency, a sense of being validated is very important. Yeah, thank you, Getty. I believe that's Don Getty that just wrote that. Giving back is not just good for the recipient, but also for the giver. The research shows that. We're still trying to find out. I know the answer, but they won't ask me, so nobody knows. Yes. Christiana, we'll dive into that a little bit. You can ask that question again. How advice takes away autonomy from people, and then we can delve into that a little bit more, if that will help. Attend to the individual. When I say attend to the individual, I want to go back to connecting, to building relationship, to actually listen without judgment. Listen without judgment. Pay attention to what they're saying. Listen to what the emotions behind the words that they're saying, not just the words that they're saying. Pay attention to that. Validate those emotions that you hear. Confirm that emotions with them. You ask somebody and they greeted, how are you really doing? They greeted you to, I'm fine. Of course, because of the way they said fine, you can hear anger in that. So I sense you're angry, or I hear you're angry. Is everything okay? Follow up, confirm and validate that the emotions that they're feeling is their own emotions, and it's okay to feel those emotions. Point the individual to appropriate professional support. I'm not asking anybody here to become a therapist, even though we need as many Black therapists as we can get. We don't have enough. So if that's the route that you're going, please go ahead. Kudos, 2 thumbs up. I need you to finish up and come out so I can have some sessions with you. But be a beacon for professional support. And that could start with a family doctor. That could start with a recommendation to the mental health clinic in your area for the individual to talk to them. That could start with just calling 811, right? And finally, encourage the individual and others to be of support. Encourage the individual to receive support from others, and encourage others to be of support to the individual. That's our only way of being able to reduce the stigma we have around mental health and the problems that is being created with mental health all around us. So, as I said, this is where I'm going to end. Thank you. Any comments, any questions, or emotional outbursts? We're gonna start with this. So I'm going to stop sharing, and then we can get into the question format. Okay. Now, oh, good. I can see everybody. Hi, Life. How you doing? Lavi?
Oh,
Doing good. How are you?
Fantastic.
I had to think about what you were saying there for a little bit, Noah.
I got it right away.
You got it.
I was like,
Oh, you
I
got it right away.
I was like, oh, okay.
Welcome. I told you, I'm not usual or normal is what people will say. But I want to start with Christiana's sort of inquiry. Advice takes autonomy from people. Yes. So when somebody asks you advice, they're asking you what to do, right? And you are telling them what to do. or when you give someone advice, you are actually giving them what to do in order to be successful, in order to do what you want, right? When you tell someone what to do, you're taking away autonomy and agency from them. They're not deciding what to do. You've decided for them. Does that make sense? So it's important that we talk to people who can give us information to be able to make decisions. All right? So the best people to talk to are ones who will listen to you and present other options. If you're given advice, you're giving the person one thing to do to be successful. But if you're given information, you're giving them multiple avenues to explore. Parents are fantastic at giving advice. But we got to step back and give more information and give more agency. So, does that help, Christiana?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Can I just ask a follow-up question to that?
Of course, go ahead.
I happen to be an older brother, and maybe for other older siblings in there, like, is taking that autonomy always necessarily a bad thing? Because sometimes when you see somebody and you wonder if they're really in a position where they can even, okay, I'm biased because being on the older side of like the kids, I'm just using the kids in this example. I can throw in other life examples too, but really the way I grew up is what I'm thinking about here, where sometimes I think, you know, like a sibling, we saw the same things. We had the same information, the same choices, and consistently, you know, bad choices are being made. And within the context of a family where you're connected, where your actions somehow affect my actions.
Me, yes.
Yeah, is it sometimes necessarily bad to stand and be kind of like that signpost to say, okay, you know, you're going too far, you know, this is a lot right here, you know, like can cases like that be where you take the autonomy away, but for
their own
benevolent purposes? Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, all right. I have my personal answer because I'm also, as I said, I'm the firstborn son of, I have 3 younger siblings. So for me, if they don't turn out right, I have issues, especially my sisters, because like everything that my sisters get is literally like all the kids that my sisters have are going to be the only root tie that I have to my mother. So those are my like inheritance. They inherit me. I have complete autonomy. So let me use this example. Boyfriend after boyfriend has always been a bad choice. Can I give my sister advice to actually pick a good one then? Knowing what I know, that, you know, this is going to be a headache onto me down the line. Can I do that? Is that a valid way to kind of put that in context a little bit? Your question in context a little bit? My answer is no, because it's not good for their mind's well-being. That's the simplest answer. That doesn't mean that's what I did or that's what I've been doing my entire life. It just means that that's the right answer. Does that make sense? What I'm trying to say, what I'm trying to get across is when we give advice, we take away autonomy, but we can give the same information and get them to actually pick what we want them to pick by giving them options, and the option that we want them to pick is the best one out there. Does that make sense? Let me use same sibling scenario as an answer. Instead of telling who your younger sister should date or what school they should go to or what they should do in school, how about you give them options of what they could do, and the one that you really want them to do, you give all the best explanation and reasons why that's the really one that they should choose. They get to choose, they get to have the sense of autonomy to make a choice, and you get to have your way of getting them to do what you want, kind of thing. It just asks you to go a little bit extra, ask you to process more, to provide more information so they can pick better. I don't know if that makes sense.
That for me makes
That's
sense.
not.
That makes sense because, sorry, Papa Ndembe, you want to speak?
Yeah, I want to just, I mean, it is very interesting. I agree with saying that you take the autonomy to the person when you give that advice. But my question is that then if that's the case, there's no one in this world needs an advice, because we'll be taking autonomy to everyone. Now, we'll talk about the mind in somebody's, in the way losing the mind. Anyway, I don't know if I can say that.
Yes, you can. That's okay.
The word advice, what is the rationale? Why the word exists? Because like I was saying, yeah, sometimes it's not bad to take away that autonomy, because if I see somebody who's about to do something which will harm the person, I mean, his own life, and then I'm in the sport. Let's say that, well, I'm struggling even to answer but
I think maybe, Papa, if I said this, it might help. I'm not saying don't give advice at all. What I'm saying is when you are supporting someone who is struggling with their mental health, don't give advice. Allow them to have a sense of autonomy. It is a way of restoring their mind's well-being. This is not in context of all life and everything that you do in your life. This is in context of when you see someone who's struggling with their mind's well-being, giving them advice takes away autonomy from them. And what that will do later down the line is not make them comfortable to continue that relationship. Does that make sense?
I get you.
That's where I'm capturing.
They need to be responsible of what they're. Yeah, I get you. They need to be responsible, but yeah, well, I get you.
Now, let me throw a wrench into my own statement right now. If someone is manic, you cannot go through the same steps that we went through about supporting somebody, because when they're manic, they have reduced inhibitions, they have reduced insight, they can't concentrate. So in that sense, you wouldn't even get to the point where you're listening to them to understand. You get to the point where you are their inhibition, you are their insight. So you stop them from buying a Tesla, you stop them from using their credit card to go shopping. You stop them. You're not giving advice. You are actually becoming their inhibition, and you're becoming their insight, because they're not in a position to be able to do that. That's one. However, if the person is struggling, but they have their faculties with them, they're able to communicate with you, they're able to talk with you, the best advice that research shows is the more autonomy people have, the better it is down the line. Because right now you're helping them through the crisis, but after you've helped them through this crisis, you need to maintain that relationship. And the more autonomy they feel around you, the more they wish to stay around you and maintain that relationship. I hope that helps.
Yes, it's help, but like you will say, that there's good advice, there's also bad advice. So the person who's receiving anything like information, the way you're putting it, if he's able to process what he's receiving, he can say, "No, this is not the option that I will go for, and that I'll go for this, that one." So it's also depend also the receiver. Is the receiver? You can give the information, we'll take it also.
Yes.
I mean, kind of advice. Can say, "No, I don't go for this one." The same, I would say that the advice also, they are good and bad. But if the person cannot process the point to know that this is good, this is bad, that's where the problem is. Yeah.
Understood. Yes.
Thank you.
So Noah.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'd like to. I have a few questions, a few follow up on this one, and then another question as well, if that's okay. So, and it's it's interesting you say that, and you're speaking specifically within the context of, let's say, supporting someone who's experiencing some mental health challenges. And I'm going to digress a tiny little bit. Like, I've just sort of enrolled my kids into preschool, and the model that they're using is somewhat based on what you're saying. I remember asking them and saying, well, what if they put on their shoes the wrong way? They say they will ask them, "Hey, look at your shoes, are they okay?" And then leave the child to make the decision and figure out, are the shoes on the right way or the wrong way, and should they be changed? And then in so doing, giving them the autonomy, giving them the ability to learn, as opposed to just saying, "Hey, sit down, let me change your shoes." And they don't know why, and that sort of thing. So I do see the value in that. But the question I want to ask is, so there's two questions. So one, what if that advice is solicited? What if person who's experiencing mental health challenges comes to you and say, "Hey, this is my predicament. What do you suggest I do?"
Okay.
That was the first question. The second question is, do you find, it's a little different, do you find racism, let's say, in the level of access to mental health supports? And if you do, how do racialized people navigate that, prevent it, understand that it's happening, or navigate through that maze? That makes sense.
Okay. I think your second one is much more interesting to delve into. So, and I'm glad that's the second question. So,
okay,
I'll poke the bear with the first one.
Okay.
Even when advice is solicited, my understanding is the most effective way to get them to actually respond better to the advice that they've solicited is more information to be able to make a better decision, right? So this is my predicament. I don't know what to do. Can you help me out? Okay, this is your predicament. The way I understand it and I see it, if I was to do this, I see this coming out. If I was to do this, I see this coming out. If I was to do nothing, I see this happening. I want to explore with you. What do you think this would yield? What do you think this would yield? And what do you think doing nothing will yield? Now, you've given what you see as happening. You've actually explored them, given you a different take on things. But what that also does is twofold. It gets the person to almost have a flash out of the state that they're in, the state of thinking that they're in, where they can only see one thing, where they can only process one thing, to shift to process other things, because you actually help them to do that. If not, what I feel or I believe happens, I feel and I believe the same thing, happens a lot of the time is we move the focus and the worry of the state that they're in, we just shift it into something else. And then they get to do what you have suggested or what you have advised they do. And if it doesn't turn out how you said it would turn out, or you think it might turn out, then you gave a wrong advice. It's never I followed or I followed the steps wrong. It's always you gave me the wrong advice. Does that make sense? So for our own elevating of each other, please provide as much options and as much information to trigger the mind to process differently. Right? What
I think that's
Noah, if I may just, if you don't mind.
Please go ahead.
So in terms of what you are saying for advice and options, the little I know around mental health is that when people have options, it gives them that sense of hope you were talking about earlier.
Yes.
Because then they have choices. They have,
yes.
Oh, I can do this, and I can go here, and I can do that, and I can do that. So then that ability to wrench back control is what really sets a person, making decisions that you hope will help them. So
Fantastic.
it is possible that they will make a choice that you wouldn't have made, but then it is not about you. It is about their state of mind and where they can go. So let's say that they make a choice that you don't really like, because if it were me, I would have done something else. We can renegotiate those options. I see you are going here. How about this and that and that? But all the time, they are in the driver's seat negotiating where they want to go. And that sense of hope is really something that really resonates with me. That's why I wrote it in the chat. Hope is all we need to be able to go. So even when the system is oppressing you as a Black person and somebody comes and, they go to someone to say, well, I went to seek mental health services and the lady at the Kirby Center, for instance, wouldn't help me. It is more helpful for me to say, well, if this person at the Kirby Center didn't help you, how about we do A, B, and C? Maybe you go to ASA, maybe you go to Immigrant Services Calgary. How about you see a Black therapist? Then the person can go, oh, I do have options. And to me, that's how it connects back. So I just thought that if I said it, maybe to help move unpack our thinking a little bit.
Fantastic. That I couldn't have said it better. Now you guys see why I say, like, I'm fortunate to have Rita on my committee, because she helps me say it better. So now your second question, which is much more fun. Okay, so I said earlier that I work for Alberta Health Services, right? It's 6:23. My work time is over. I'm on my own time. Everything I say is on my own clock. Don't post this on Facebook just yet. Wait till I finish, and then we can see if I believe in it enough for it to get out there. Remember when I said at the beginning, right when we're setting it up, that the system that was used to create this Dominion of Canada is not inherently your system. It's not inherently your way of being. It goes against your ontology and your epistemology, because you didn't set it up, right? Your people didn't set it up. That being said, we are navigating.
Do you want to unpack ontology and epistemology, please, for the non?
Okay. So that's why I've been trying not to say it all this while, because it will require unpacking. So when I say, let's start with epistemology. It's literally our way of knowing knowledge, of understanding knowledge, right? How we know things, how we understand what we know. That's our epistemology, or the way of us processing knowledge. Our ontology is a little bit deeper than that. It's our beliefs, our reality, our truth. So here I'll borrow something that Rita said that I've actually quoted elsewhere, that for an African, being a walking contradiction is a state of normalcy. Does it sound like Rita to you? For me, asking me a question and getting a story is normal. But that's not necessarily what is expected. Or let me step back and look at it this way. For me, believing that my ancestors still protect me, believing that there are angels and there are demons, believing that there's a God, and yet at the same time having complete and absolute autonomy in everything that I do and say, seems like a contradiction, right? My ancestors guide everything I do, but at the same time, I get to do everything that I want. For me, that's normal. But for a lot of people, that's like you're a walking contradiction, right? The system that was used to create this Dominion of Canada, on which our mental health care is based on, is not innate, or it's not inherently ours. So if we try to approach it, there are so many things that will go wrong if we try to approach it with our own selves and our own being. One of the first things that go wrong is that the system that was designed sees you as inferior. Period. I can't say it any better, and I can't say it any right. You have a higher tolerance to pain. You have no hope. You are the weakest of the weaklings, all at the same time. That's the system's perception of you and the system's way of seeing you. So in your trying to access the system head on, you come across these contradictions. So the people who are sitting at the front desk sees you as inferior. So your problems that you are bringing to them are non-issues, non-problems. So they will not have the same response to it as anybody else. So if we say it that way and we put it in that context, then yes, racism, which is a byproduct of the system that's the Dominion of Canada, shows itself in mental health care. We can't expect it not to. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Us going in, not expecting it to show itself, actually means we're not using our faculties right in the first place. Go ahead, Christiana.
My question is rather more related to your own community. I wanted to know if you had faced any setbacks in your career from your own peers, because you mentioned you're from Ghana. So I was thinking maybe if you have any Ghanaian peers who maybe see mental health maybe not as a non-important thing or something like that. Yes.
Simply put, Ghana, as I'm still navigating this system that's the Dominion of Canada, other Ghanaians are doing so too. And there's a huge stigma with mental health because we haven't taken time to understand that we have a mind, so therefore our mind needs to do well. You would think that everybody knows this, right? But that's not the case. So yes, there's resistance to talking about mental health, to exploring what it is. And that's what I'm trying to get my research to do, to get us Ghanaians who live in Alberta to conceptually decolonize the concept of mental health and its promotion, right? We need to be able to see, understand, and talk about mental health from an indigenous way and even from a colonial way, whichever way we want to look at it. From the Canadian system, and I put Canadian in quotes because it's the colonial way of doing things, and from the indigenous way of understanding it. And that means exploring how do we talk about mental health or our mind in our languages? How do we talk about it in our stories, in our folklore? How do we pass on the future knowledge onto the next generation about the way we use our mind and how do we keep it well? Right? So you asked the question, I made it a story about me, always. That's my way of being. Does that make sense? So yes, there is hesitancy, there is resistance to exploring mental health and mental well-being in indigenous communities around the world, because most indigenous communities are living under an oppressive colonial system. And Ghana is living under a neo-colonial system. So we have 400 years of colonial rule and colonial imposition. We're trying to shake it off. We're trying to get rid of it in 63 years, I believe. We're trying to see if we can, shake it off in 63 years. So I still think we have a little bit more time to go before we inherently go back to our roots and our ways of being. I hope that helps answer the question a little bit. Rita has a comment, and then Caroline will come to you. Okay.
Yes. So I'm just wanting to reconnect to our Saturday class from where Unoa is speaking, and it connects to the question that was posed. So when Monesha was speaking, she said something very profound. What does the system think about you before you enter the building? That is what we need to be processing. So let's say, and one of the scenario that I'm building in my head, I don't know whether it's a good one, but I'll try. If it's not a good one, maybe somebody can come up with a better one. But let's say that, an African person is experiencing psychosis, and they go into, somebody takes them to the ER. What might occur to somebody first could be, what are they on?
Yes. And
that becomes where the system is not amenable to us. Yes. Because if it's a person that is non-white, where we don't have this stereotype following you around, they'll be like, well, this is unusual. We want to do something about this. But if it is me, what did she take? Becomes the question. And so you start looking for a solution where the problem is not. Yes. And so I'm just using this to kind of connect back to the talk on anti-racism and systemic racism, and then move forward to what Noah was talking about in the question that was posed.
That is brilliant. And I want to add this to it. If you have an African that you are supporting to receive mental health care, your advocacy work becomes threefold. One, you have to get the indigenous African to want to receive care. That's hard on its own because of all the racist, insulting reception that we've gotten all this while. You have to get the person who's going to be providing the care to be understanding of the African and his situation, or his or her situation. And then thirdfold, you have to have the patience to bear all of it. I'm not taking you out of the equation because it's very, very important. You have to have the patience to bear it, to be of that support. Right. So if we use the same scenario that Rita just gave, you have an African who is hallucinating, and their hallucination is taking the form of their seeing their dead ancestor. Twofold. Remember that when I talked about it, I said that I believe in that. I believe my if ever an angel was going to appear to me, the angels know that if they show up as white people, I'm not going to listen to a word that they say. Angels, they must know that. Right? So an angel is not going to show up as a white person to talk to me. An angel is definitely going to show up as an ancestor that's close to me, that I trust. Now, I have that, and it's obviously, you put that in context and you say, Noah, you're hallucinating, let's get you help because your ancestor is dead. And all right, if I want to get the help, right, you have to bear with me being in that contradictory state, and you have to then advocate for me to say, hey, he doesn't smoke, he doesn't drink, he doesn't do any drugs. This is unusual for him because I know him. Does that make sense? And you have to deal with the fact that they may not believe you, anything that you say. That's why I don't take you out of that equation. I hope that helped, Rita. And Nketi, did I get close to answering your second question?
Yes, I think so, because the second question was, how do we navigate that? So I think you covered it, yes.
How do you navigate it? Yes, it's what I'm doing. You decolonize the system. That's the easiest answer, but it's like turning the Titanic. It's impossible to do. You've seen the iceberg. You're trying to get the captain to turn it. I don't know if the captain will turn, but we'll see how it goes. That's the easiest answer. How do we navigate it? With patience and with maintaining hope, right? Keeping that currency that we can use to exchange. Caroline, go ahead.
I was just, I hope I still have my my thought with my question. In your research, have you done any, have you tapped into knowing why, generally speaking, us people of African descent we're apprehensive to seeking mental health services? Have you touched up on any of that?
I've read quite a few that I would like to share.
Okay.
Some are colonial in roots, others are not, right? So for example, in Ghana, there are 3 psychiatric hospitals. They're all in the southern belt of the country, right? So that means mental health care is where the white people were. And what they used it for was to take away the homeless people from the street and the crazy people from the street, so that, the city where they lived looked clean and without problem. So there is that. There is also a significant association for many indigenous Africans of the supernatural and the natural existing at the same time, right? So my mind's well-being, my mind is where my spiritual life, my spiritual reality, and my physical reality, that's where they meet, right? So if you say my mind is not well, it could be that the spiritual realm is relaying information to me that I'm unable to process.
Right.
In this physical realm. Therefore, I need help from people who can do that, people who can better explain, better interpret, right? So I need to make a connection with traditional healers. I need to make connection with people who make totems. I need to make connection with, so there is that aspect in our belief and our reality that we can't separate, right? And then there is the contradiction of both, right? Where we're not allowed to have our cake and eat it too. So we're not allowed to hold our beliefs and exist in this realm, right? So as I said, I used as an example, if I talked about like being visited by my dead grandfather and being given information, being given options that I wasn't thinking about, that is considered hallucination, right? Because it doesn't fit in the ontology of where I exist, right? However, if I said, an angel appeared to me all clad in white with clothes of lightning, and told me what to do, and I was doing that, people's first thought would be, oh man, this guy is extremely religious and powerful. He's getting revelations from angels and stuff. Do you see the contradiction that's happening? So for me, if I was made the president of Ghana, one of the first things that I would do is I'll arrest all the pastors who sees visions and get and give prophecies. I'll arrest them all and put them all in the psychiatric ward for proper evaluation, right? Because again, they're not all the people giving them the information are white, and I don't like that. So that's a different story. It might take them a while to catch on and say, let's say our ancestors gave us that information and we will leave it alone. But what I'm trying to say is we exist in quite a contradictory state that makes us specifically as Africans struggle with balancing our well-being in this environment that we find ourselves in, right? So the pressures that are coming on is extreme, to say the least.
All right.
That's a lot to unpack.
I told you I'm not normal. Jemima, I want to hear you say something. Anything.
Hi, guys.
So.
Hi. Oh, sorry.
I'm waiting for Jemima to say something, and then Ike can come in. I don't know what she sounds like, and I want to find out.
Hi, guys.
Hi. Oh, thank you. I told you I'm not normal. Ike, go ahead.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Noah. I think what I'll do with my question is I'll get it to maybe get us to all kind of speak. Maybe you'll get a sense of kind of like what everyone's saying, and then you can give us a final word instead of just perhaps responding to just mine right there.
Fantastic.
But for me, I really appreciated everything you're saying and how you broke it down. I know that I found this out a little while ago, but for me, it's even not having language around some of these feelings was what held me back a lot. Because for me, I realized that I had anxiety a lot, like as a kid, and probably through some of the experiences I went through growing up. The country wasn't always stable, and coming here, when you start to kind of feel it in, the answers we get is like, or what people perceive is just like, what's wrong with you? Like in the house, I was like, there's something just wrong with you. But to get to that step to identify it as anxiety, I don't know if we necessarily get there. So that's something that I really stood out in your presentation for me. And I know that this piece, because me having to try to hide maybe the anxious feelings I was feeling in school, a lot of times I'd get in trouble. I thought I was not even doing anything, but the stern face maybe I would have, or all these people would perceive that in a different light. So I was wondering if at the end, maybe you could share some resources we have specifically for young males, who tend to hide some of their emotions or don't have language around some of their emotions, how to support them, or how systems, school systems, health systems can better speak to that population. Because I think even me personally here in Calgary, I've seen arrests happen when a guy is stressed out trying to explain something, and it gets taken completely the wrong way and things happen. So a word about that would be good. And yeah, so anybody else, I will tag Jolie. What stood out to you?
Can I just add, please feel free to just let us know what your learnings are, or if you've learned anything new, or if you have any increased awareness about anything, as Ike is tagging people. Yeah, so do feel free to comment on that.
That's good. Yeah. So I'll start with Jolie.
I know. I just want to thank you for doing this whole presentation for us and going through all the little bits and breaking it down and to make it easier to understand. I think it is mental health right now, especially with COVID and everything going on, is really important. It's a really important topic to focus on. And I do think the language that we use does matter, and the way we approach people And so I really appreciate you going over how we can better support and talk to people going through a crisis or mental health, who have mental health illnesses, and also opening it up to them and letting them know that there's no shame in having a mental health illness or even talking about it, and just being open to talk about it, especially in the Black community. I think it's really hard to get people to do that. So I think it's encouraging everyone. Thank you.
You're welcome. Who are you tagging? Jolie, you have to tag someone.
I'll tag Raisa.
Yeah, sorry. Noah, thank you for your presentation. I was also going to mention that mental health it's not taboo, but it's something that we don't either notice or we don't really, we just don't mention it. We just don't talk about it in our community, and it's not noticed. It's something, it's still brand new for us. And I like the quote, not the quote, but something that you said about the system, how it's not in our DNA, and like sorry, I forgot what you said, but I wrote it down. But I like what you said, and I really agree to that. I think that we are very different. We're very different from the people that are originally here. We think different, we live different, and it's just, yeah.
Thank you.
I'm gonna tag Jemima.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your presentation. I feel like I didn't have much to say just because it was like a lot to kind of take in. I'm a psychology student, so like mental health and all of that is like really interesting to me. And I feel like having these conversations help me figure out what I want to do, because I don't know what I want to do, but I know that it's going to be something in this type of field. So things like this are really helpful. But yeah, I was just kind of trying to take everything in because it is a lot that we don't talk about, but I'm glad that like in our generation, it's something that's more accessible to Black people, because I feel like Black mental health and like white mental health is different. It's just two different things just because of our upbringing and like how our parents talk about it even. Because like in some families you can feel like you're actually like a whole witch just because you have mental health issues, you know, stuff like that. So I'm just happy that we're having these conversations, but I just don't have much to say about it because I'm always trying to like process things and understand things in like my way and things like that. But thank you.
And you being happy makes me happy. And I can't believe you got a whole witch. Usually you get half a witch, but you know, you're starting a witchery. You're beginning your witchery, but a whole witch? All right. Okay. Thank you. Who are you tagging, Jemima?
Oh yeah. I'll tag Christiana.
Well, again, many thanks for giving this presentation. I think it's really important for us to be discussing mental health. I think one big takeaway that I learned is when you spoke about depression, how you said it's like the absence of hope, something like that.
Yes.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty insightful to kind of understand these things better as well. Also, when you mentioned like just how it's a whole spectrum and that we're not always in the middle, and that was pretty important to know. And I think also, I'm still kind of confused about Black mental health versus white mental health. I don't always see the difference. I guess it also depends on your personal experience. Because maybe if you've been like born in a Western country and that's kind of all you know, it's hard to kind of see the indigenous perspective of that. But I think that was pretty interesting to see the comparisons and to see there's different ways to approach mental health.
Okay. Thank you. Who are you tagging?
I'm going to tag La Vie.
Thank you. I don't have much to say as I just came in 5 minutes before you finished. I'm happy that you come from my old man, Links. That's my best man. I really love him and would like to wanted to see him, meet him prior to his passing. Unfortunately, life decided. Speaking of mental health, I think us as Black people and Africa, or in general, there's no much we can blame ourselves or see ourselves as if we are behind. A few weeks ago, I read about the history of mental health in America and in Europe. At the beginning, they did not also do well. They did not do any better than us, where they used to call mentally disturbed people as insane and other names. And the practice was, if your family member has a mental problem, they would take them to the priest. The priest throw them, they tie their hands and throw them in the river. If the person sinks, then they have evil spirit. They will kill them. There's nothing you can do with them right there. There was no treatment for them. And if the person flows, they have a chance that they are not witch. At least the priest can pray for them and see if they can heal. So looking at those, we are not any different. Just that our practice, the way we conceive it, a little bit different, are still behind until today, in a way that those terminologies of mental health or someone is mentally disturbed or mentally challenged doesn't exist. In Africa, if someone is not okay, they are just crazy, finish. That's how brutal we are about it. So that shows how much we have as a journey in terms of getting ourselves there. As I said, I just came late. I don't have much to say, but I have a concern with regard to the terminology you used. Instead of speaking of advice you like, or you were using the term giving options. I do believe that we're just trying to be polite and move a little bit away from using the word advice, because advice, what makes advice, different from imposition, is the fact that if the advisor is well informed, they need to give option. Even if it's called advice, as you are trying to move away from that word, the advisor need to give option. Unfortunately, from where we come from, we are used to that mentality where mostly our African leaders, the president and the kings, were taken in hostage by their advisors. Instead of advising them, they would impose them what to do. The same thing they did with Mobutu and the Rwanda people around them, imposing them whatever to do. So I think the word advice still is important, is still stand up, can still use it, only depends on what the advisor does. Are you giving options, or you are imposing the person you're advising what to do? For example, it can still be an advice. You come to ask for an advice from me, and I say, okay, here are a few options I have. Or if I were you, this is what I would do. Or this are what I can suggest to you. I think all those fit still in the words advice, just the mentality and the way we go about advising people. But the word advice, I think is still relevant and can still be used depending on how one decide or one choose to advise the person they've asked for their help.
I think we have Afo and Felicia left. We have, I think, 6 minutes left. If we can get, let's go Afo first, and Felicia just wrap it, and then over to Noah.
Okay.
Yeah, I really like, and like everyone's saying, I really like the conversation we're having, because conversation around mental health, they should be really important. Like I remember, I was doing high school in Congo, and there we never talk about anything like that remotely close to like mental health stuff. It was only like I heard it a lot in like coming here, being in university. That's where I hear it a lot more. But then yeah, and also like also on the subject of we're talking about on like advice and stuff, and how like imposing and like giving one option is not good. That's not something I've ever really thought about. How at times it can feel like you're just imposing on someone else, and that could be detrimental to them. And also just want to say also just kind of like tying back to what I was saying earlier on just a conversation around mental health, how like sometimes you can have like anxiety, stuff like that, we just don't know it. And then you just don't have that conversation around it to have that terminology to really understand properly what that is. Because even like for like one thing I know is like it's not mental health related, but even like for me, I have glasses now. Like I would show you, but like my camera is not working. But for me to get glasses, it's not something I ever realized that for me, what I can't see is stuff that other people can see. It never clicked in my mind because I really had that conversation. I didn't really go to the eye doctor for that. It wasn't until I ended up having like a grain of sand under my eyelid where I had to go to a doctor to get it removed. And then they had to check my eyesight afterwards to make sure my eyes weren't like damaged. And that was the only time when I actually like ended up getting my glasses. But like before that, like I'd always be sitting at the very front of the class, not realizing that those at the back, they can just see normally because they don't need glasses, they have better eyesight. So it's like a conversation around mental health. It's like when we don't talk about it, we don't have those conversations, it's so easy for us to like not notice the struggles we have in our lives and not notice that those struggles that we have are not the same struggles that other people have. It's like you might have like anxiety, whatever, like being depressed, all that. You might just think, oh, it's everyone like that, or like the one that that's not like that, they're just different or whatever, or it's my fault for being this way. We don't have that proper conversation. I think that's kind of like my biggest takeaway from this.
Felicia?
Yeah, sorry I was late to staff meeting and whatnot, but yeah, I think for me mental health is a big I think because I think I grew up like always knowing that like you know there's a strong Black woman, or you know you can do it all. And I think with working with the teens that I work with and the teen moms that I work with, I've realized that like I feel like everyone at my school has some sort of mental health issue. And also just like I think postpartum depression is real and very much prevalent in the Black community, but I think a lot of people seem to put pressure on like even Black women to like be strong mothers, and you know you take care of the family, you take care of your kids, and but there's a lot of women that actually suffer with postpartum depression, and it's not recognized and it's not talked about, and it's very, very real. And I don't even think some of us women even realize that we could be having that. We have all the feelings and we have all the symptoms of it, but I don't think we actually recognize that that's something that we are experiencing after having a child. So I feel like there's just so much with mental health that's just not uncovered. And like I have, like my sister tells me about, like she thinks that like people who get therapy is crazy and things like that. Like I don't know, I just feel like there's just a lot of like stigma behind like even like going to talk to someone or having someone help you through your mental health issues or whatnot. Like they think that you don't need to talk to anybody, or you shouldn't be talking to anybody about your problems or your relationships and stuff. And I so don't believe that. Like if someone will sit and listen to me talk all day, I would love that, to not charge me $100, $200 an hour. Trust me, I'd take that up in a second. But a lot of people don't realize or don't feel like they should go talk to someone about a lot of the things and issues that they're going through. So yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. So I have 1 minute, right? Okay, all right. I want to thank everyone on here for being absolutely. Oh, Rita, go ahead before.
Yes, I just wanted to clarify something that Jemima said, and I think Christiana, you were hinting at it a little bit around Black mental health and white mental health. And Jemima, when you were speaking, what struck me was the language you use. Feel like we think about it, or maybe it's race. I think it's Jemima. If correct me if I use the wrong person, but it was more like we talk about it differently and we use different words. I understand that, but what I want to stress is that the biology of what we experience is not different at all. So there's no Black mental health and there's no white mental health or Asian mental health. The difference is the way we respond to it, and the difference is the way we are treated in the system when we have our problems. So yes, we have differences, but I just wanted to emphasize these differences are not biological. Just so we don't move away with the misconception that, you know, psychosis presents differently in a Black person and it presents differently in a white person. Correct me if I'm wrong, Noah, but I don't think that's what it was.
No, you're absolutely right.
That was definitely exactly what I meant. I just used completely different words, but that's definitely what I meant, was just that in our community, we don't talk about it enough. We don't put enough emphasis on it, and we don't help our people. Like, we just don't have that much access to helping ourselves. Not at all that like our mental, like depression in Black people is different from depression in other people. That's definitely not what I meant. I just used terrible words. So thank you for clarifying.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Sorry, no, I forgot my wife hasn't even spoken yet, so I almost got
She need to? Okay, go ahead.
She's there, and then you can go after.
I don't really need to. No, I'll just
go ahead, please.
The kids are gonna take over in a second, but I think I just want to thank you again for your presentation. I think it was awesome. I think in the early parts of the presentation, when you were breaking down you know, like really breaking down mental health in a way that I have never heard before. I'm a social worker by trade. So, you know, for me, that was really awesome to see and to just kind of even get that information for myself and my own work. So I'll just leave it at that. I'll let you finish, and thank you again.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I thought I was going to be able to summarize everything in 1 minute, but now we're over. So I might try to do it in 3 minutes, just so it's a 7:05. So not that like 7:04 or something like that, some weird number like that. So I have a bunch of reading to do for my schoolwork, but for me, I still need to read outside of my schoolwork to help me process what I'm doing for my schoolwork. And the last book that I just read was by Neil deGrasse Tyson, called Astronomy for people who don't understand physics. Also, it's a weird long title. Neil deGrasse Tyson's book, if you astrophysics, for people who don't understand physics or something like that. If you get a chance, give it a read. It's not, the title should help you realize that he's not going to go deep in formulas and stuff like that. But there's a quote in there, something that he says that really, really resonated with me. It says, it's hard to study the skies when you're hungry. It's hard to study the stars when you're hungry. And I want to tie that back to right where we started. The fact that we're focusing on trying to understand our mind's health, our mind's well-being at this point and this time in this way is because we have gone to the point where we believe we are addressing some of our basic needs. Or at least personally for me, I feel privileged enough to say my basic necessities are being met enough that I can explore my mind's well-being. Doesn't mean that it's not important. It just means that in terms of priority, it is not there. When we talk in our communities, explored in our communities, understood in our communities, it is not that it's not important to us, but we are trying to breathe. So who has time to think when you're trying to breathe? Do you understand where I want us to capture it from? To give ourselves enough grace to move on this journey, right? To be gracious to ourselves to continue this journey. So Jemima being interested in mental health, that is awesome. Follow my footsteps, become like me, and be one great mental health educator for our community. Or better yet, maybe you can be one of the great people that we can see as therapists that we can come and talk to. For everybody on here who is trying to figure out, what do I do with my mind's well-being? Sincerely, what I can say to you is this. If you have the privilege enough to think about the way that you're thinking, give yourself enough grace to not think that you are behind, you are late to the game or anything, and push forward. Because of the way we are the only ones who can save us. And we will do it. And that's what I want to end on.
I was just about to clap there, and I realized I was on mute. I was like,
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Noah.
That was so good.
Yeah, so that wraps it up for this session here. So for everyone in the program, everybody who wants to come through, anybody in Alberta, we're doing a live event to celebrate the 30th of June, Congo independence at Ashley's grandma's acreage. So all the interns who filled out the doodle poll, thank you. All the ones who haven't gotten to it yet, looking forward to having your answers. And we'll have a planning meeting for that. And then hopefully we start meeting in person. That's a whole nother thing, but catch you all later. Good session.
Thank you, Noah.
Thanks, Noah.
And Ketty, I just finished reading what you wrote. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.